And Heim time is officially here. The offseason is underway and the rebuild has started in St. Louis. Welcome back to Cardinals on My Time, presented by Interstate 70 Sports Media. I am Scott Plaza, and I am coming to you after the St. Louis Cardinals made the first big splash of the offseason. Beyond today's Sonny Gray deal, I'm going to dive into rumors about other guys on the roster and discuss some quotes by Chaim Bloom that show that this truly is a new era of Cardinals baseball. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. Let's get started with Cardinals on My Time.
I've been thinking about this, Mr. Han. If I'm here and you're here, doesn't that make it our time?
All right, on Monday, John Heyman seemingly out of nowhere reported that a deal was done that would send veteran starter Sonny Gray to Boston in return for two younger arms. Now, coming into the offseason, Gray was mentioned as a trade target as he was effectively due $40 million this year on a one-year deal. And after some negotiations back and forth with some restructure on the back end, to finish the deal, the Cardinals will be sending the Red Sox an additional $20 million to help offset that $40 million price tag. The dollars heading to Beantown had to help increase the assets coming back to St. Louis as they received two controllable and somewhat projectable arms for one season of Gray. All right, now putting the name comments aside, Richard Fitz is the major league arm that figures to impact the St. Louis pitching staff immediately. I actually touched on Fitz and his connection to the Cardinals last offseason when Jake Peavy actually pointed to him as a potential return for a Nolan Arenado deal at that time. But now a year later, Fitz makes his way to St. Louis with an inside track to the opening day rotation. Now take that as you will, but regardless of Fitz's talent, I think that says more about the Cardinals starting five than it does about anything else. Now, after the Sonny Gray trade, it looks like the penciled rotation will be Matthew Liberatore, Michael McGreevy, Andre Palante, reliever project Kyle Leahy, and then Fitz. While Fitz does have 14 big league starts under his belt, he has a 2-5 career record and a 3.97 ERA. Now, in the minors, he did show some strikeout potential, but in the big leagues, he's averaging less than a strikeout an inning despite a mid-90s fastball and a couple quality breaking pitches. With some consistency and some time in the rotation, I don't think it'd be surprising to see those strikeout numbers jump back up to near that one per inning that we could see from Fitz. Now, while Fitz will be joining the 26-man roster upon his arrival to St. Louis, lefty Brandon Clark, the other piece coming to St. Louis, will be ticketed for the minor leagues. Now, Clark was just drafted in 2024 when Boston took him in the fifth round, and he didn't pitch that year, but did pick up 38 professional innings this past season between A and high A ball. The potential was on full display as Clark flashed a triple-digit fastball potential with a wipeout slider, and he struck out 60 batters in his 14 games. Now, for the 6'4", 220-pound lefty, the issue is his inconsistency around the zone as he walked over 15% of opposing hitters last year. Now, he may start the year in high A, but he could definitely make his way into the rotation in Springfield before long. And I would hope that his first full season in professional baseball, he gets the chance to work as a starter as opposed to going back and forth between starting and the bullpen, because it seems like his floor is pretty projectable as a useful reliever, but we might as well try to see if they can get anything out of him as a starter before just kind of pumping the brakes on that. So all in all, I would say it's a solid return for a rental piece in Sonny Gray. I usually don't worry too much about the money aspect of things because the reality is it's not my money, so I don't really care about how much people are getting paid and where it goes to. I get why it matters when teams set hypothetical payroll limits, but in a sport like baseball where there's no salary cap, the financial part doesn't really mean that much to me. Now, I did enjoy Gray's time here in St. Louis, and he thought he was a fine leader of the pitching staff, but he was just never really going to take that pitching staff to the next level. It was nice to see him as a quality workhorse option, and he should have a solid chance at the postseason in Boston. Now, before I transitioned into rumors surrounding other Cardinals players, I want to take a quick break. As I step away for a second, if you could take a second to like and follow Interstate 70 Sports Media on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and also take some time to check out my other stuff on Redbird Rants and VivaAlbertos.com. That would be awesome. Be right back. All right, so in a nice change of pace, Chaim Bloom was not messing around and started making moves early, and I anticipate him to now also act often. With Sonny Gray gone, I expect the focus to turn to Brendan Donovan, who can fit on almost any roster around the major leagues. While Gray was a reportedly popular target, he was pretty expensive and an older pitcher, so I think that Donovan has even more suitors than Gray may. I think the Gray trade shows that Bloom isn't going to try and sit around and outsmart the market and try to put teams against each other. And if he finds a deal to his liking, I think he's just going to jump on it and get things done. That's a refreshing change of pace. It is probably appreciated on the players' end too. With that way of thinking, I would hope there's a resolution to Donovan trade talks shortly after the holidays. Now, without diving too far into the potential matches for Donovan, it looks like the Cardinals are setting their sights on pitching, and that could continue when they try to find that suitor for Donnie. Now, trying to gauge a potential return for Donnie based on the Gray trade, I think is kind of wasted practice as there's a little comparison between the two. Donovan's cheaper, younger, and potentially more valuable as a utility man with a Gold Glove and Silver Slugger finalists in his back pocket. And I think that because of that and his fit pretty much anywhere around the league, the Cardinals potentially sneak a top 100 prospect away from the rival teams. But besides that, I think it's going to be hard to predict what they could get. At this point, I would put it at about 95% that Donnie's going to be traded, and I'd put that at near equal percentage on his infield partner, Nolan Arenado, being dealt as well. Um, After the Sonny Gray trade, Buster Olney made an interesting post on Twitter, and he reported that Arenado will be released if he isn't traded. But we saw earlier in the week that Jeff Jones, who actually spoke to Chaim Bloom about this, he nixed Olney's report because he quoted his own question with Chaim Bloom, where if they saw a potential release for Arenado being on the table, and Chaim Bloom basically said that's not an option. While it may be difficult to find a trade for Nolan Arenado or trying to find the best value for him might be a little bit difficult, I think that like with Gray, both parties feel that a change of scenery is best. So I could see Arenado accepting a deal with a borderline contender just to get some clarity on his own situation and just get this offseason moving along. Now, the other offensive trade pieces that have been rumored in talks around the league have been Lars Nootbaar, Nolan Gorman, and to a lesser extent, Alec Burleson and Jordan Walker. Now, Newt continues to be a huge question mark since he just went a strange heel surgery. His status in the opening day lineup is in question, and that could be for with the Cardinals or for any other organization. But I think the chances of him starting the season on the injured list are pretty high up there as well. Now, there hasn't been a lot of previous professional athletes that have had his surgery, so the Cardinals also have opted to go against putting a timeline on his return. So just I think at this point it's hard to count Nootbaar in as a sure thing to next year's starting lineup on the opening day roster. Um, with that brings me to Gorman. Gorman's been brought up here and there, even as a potential trade piece for NL Central rival, the Pittsburgh Pirates. But in my situations where I think Donovan and Arenado are going to be traded, I think the Cardinals see him as an internal option to fill along the infield along with JJ Weatherholt, with Weatherholt playing second and Gorman playing third. So I think trading Arenado, Gorman, and Donovan would just give you too many question marks in an infield that's already going to be extremely young. And I still think Gorman has shown that potential to be a future piece in a lineup, whether in St. Louis or play his way into a little bit more trade value. Now, to finalize with those other pieces, I don't anticipate Burley or Walker playing elsewhere in 2026, and I'd be surprised if the Cardinals are even realistic with taking calls on either player. So, once again, I anticipate both Burley and Walker being in the outfield at some point next year. Now, the final move for these past few busy days was re-signing Joel Pozo after his non-tendered a few days before. For some reason, there's a big outroar saying, I can't believe we're letting Pozo go. And then they sign him back on a split deal with a 40-man spot. And then people are still now even confused with that, saying, I thought we have 100 catchers. What's the point of Pozo being here? He's a depth option. The catching rotation is young and pretty unsettled. There's no problem with Pozo being back, and the fact that he took that split deal to make less than the MLB salary. I think that shows that he's just kind of a mutual respect with the Cardinals organization, and he was never really going anywhere anyway. So there's that speculation around definitely Cardinals Twitter about what Pozo means for the team. And I don't think there really is any change in their future view on the catching situation. I anticipate Ivan Herrera to still get that first crack at the starting catcher job with right now Pedro Pages backing him up. I think Pages could be a trade target for other teams around the league, and I think that would happen with or without Pozo on the roster. The call up of Jimmy Crooks last year, while it didn't go great, at least they got his toes wet at the major league level. So there could be some type of Herrera Crooks platoon at the major league level to where once again Pages is expendable, whether Pozo is on the roster or not. Okay, so I'm going to take one last quick break before doing some final talking points about Chaim Bloom's comments on the trade and the team's direction, and then diving into one last trade piece, this time on the pitching side. Once again, I will be right back. All right, after the Sonny Gray trade, Chaim Bloom spoke with the St. Louis media, including John Denton, Brandon Kiley, and others, to discuss the deal and the rest of the outseason. To first shed his lights on the thoughts about the pitchers coming back from Boston, Bloom was gushing about Clark, specifically saying, quote, "You could put him on the short list of the highest upside, most talented pitchers in the minor leagues." Now, that comment, along with a little video sent out by Baseball America earlier in the season, called Clark a breakout prospect to watch this season. So the combination of Bloom's comments and Baseball America's scouting report has to have some excitement coming along in St. Louis. And the trade of Sonny Gray signals that the Cardinals are ready to dive headfirst into the rebuild. Now, Bloom said that there's a destination for the Cardinals at the end of this rebuild, but it's definitely going to take some time to get there. Now, this is just the first trade, and which is just going to be just one stop en route to the next great St. Louis Cardinals team. But it was an awesome change of pace to see him act with a sense of urgency after we've been told to have patience for so long. Now, Bloom said, quote again, "The more fully we commit to what we need to do, the better it will go and the quicker we will get there. I don't view this as something that's about patience. I view it as something to attack with urgency." So again, he took that word patience and threw it out the window and said that we are going to act with urgency, which is a great tone coming out and is very different from what we've been hearing out of the St. Louis front offices in the past. That also makes me believe that that Donovan deal is going to come sooner rather than later, as he looks to just get this offseason going and to see what's coming up next. Now, the final Bloom note comes from his spot on ESPN 101 with BK, when he said that even though the team just subtracted a quality arm in Sonny Gray, the team knows it's going to have to add something to the major league roster at some point. Now, once the big deals are done, again, Sonny Gray, Nolan Arenado, Brendan Donovan, and potentially more, then we figure out how the money exchanges hands, Bloom will likely have a better idea of what the roster needs are going to be and how much cash is left for him and is ready to allocate to major league talent. When we're talking about that major league talent that's available, I want to take another quick sidebar for some earlier news regarding free agent interest and where the Cardinals see themselves. Now, former closer Ryan Helsley, who the Cardinals dealt at last year's deadline, had mentioned mutual interest in returning to St. Louis after last year's trade, and he just recently popped up in the news cycle again, being viewed as a potential starter, where he spent some time in the minor leagues before becoming a lockdown closer. Now, to me, I think a 2-year deal for Helsley with the thought of him becoming a starter could be fun, and I think that St. Louis could be a good spot for him to do that. Now, the reason I'm thinking that 2-year deal, year one is for him to build up. He hasn't worked as a starter in a handful of years, and he's had his workload very closely managed during his time in St. Louis. So you use year one to build him up. Maybe you give him some chances as a sixth starter or as a piggyback guy with someone like Kyle Leahy or another reliever coming into the rotation. And then that year two is where you fully unlock Ryan Helsley, assuming there is a season in 2027. Now, assuming that Helsley could stay healthy and has that starting potential, he could play himself into either a big contract, he could become that ace for the next great Cardinals team, or he could play his way into trade talks once again, if he finds that he can be an effective starter. Again, I think that St. Louis could be the spot for him to give this an opportunity, because they should have the patience and timeline to allow Helsley that opportunity to figure out his starter arsenal again, and they have had that opportunity to work with him for the past handful plus, no, 10 years, I believe, since he's been in the Cardinals organization. So they know how he works better than anybody. So as I look to wrap this up, a final point I brought up, I want to bring up since I was talking about trades again, is that the Cardinals reliever closer specialist Jojo Romero is drawing interest around the league. Since it appears that the Cardinals won't be winning a ton of games next year, a high leverage reliever like Jojo Romero would probably be better used as a trade piece and sent somewhere else, similar to what the Cardinals did with Helsley, Steven Matz, and Phil Maton last year. Now, this year, Romero is in the final year of his arbitration and controllable years and is expected to earn a little bit less than $5 million during 2026. So it's a pretty affordable salary with a guy with his positive track record. Along with that positive results these past few years, and really not much else on the market in terms of lefty relievers, Romero is going to become a popular target who could probably get a solid return from those contenders that are looking for some bullpen help. Now, this is where I'd like to see the focus kind of change a little bit, especially assuming the Cardinals focus on pitching in their other deals. I wouldn't mind seeing them pivot towards some upper level bat first prospects in a deal surrounding someone like Jojo Romero. I have a piece coming out soon in Redbird Ranch that talks about the lack of minor league depth, especially at the upper levels at first base and kind of just around the infield. So if they could use someone like Romero, a younger quality lefty reliever, and try to fetch some power potential for a quad A or potentially major league ready bat, I think that'd be something fun that really would be a change of pace in St. Louis because there is some excitement around the young bats in St. Louis, especially in the minor leagues around, they called up Brian Torres, JJ Weatherholt, I think is still going to make his debut this year. But I am ready for some big, beefy boppers who can pop 40 homers a season. Again, that's something that's been missing in St. Louis for a while. But that should just about do it here for me. And it was actually a pretty busy few days, which is good, seeing as how slow it was coming into these last couple days. So for the Cardinals organization, I thought it was a good time to come in and check in with everyone after they started to actually dip their toe into the offseason. I'm sure there's going to be a flurry of moves coming after the holidays, but until then, happy Thanksgiving and thank you for hanging out. This was another episode of Cardinals on My Time.